The bottle shattered against the wall inches from my head. Glass rained down like frozen tears, sharp and glittering in the dim light of our basement apartment. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Pain was a language I'd learned to speak fluently by the time I turned 16, and my father was the cruelest teacher I'd ever known. He stumbled toward me, breath reeking of cheap whiskey and cheaper excuses. His eyes were bloodshot, wild, the kind of wild that came from drowning in your own failures and dragging everyone down with you. "Get up," he slurred, voice thick with venom. "We got company coming. Someone who's gonna fix everything." I stayed on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, counting the cracks in the concrete like I always did when the world became too sharp to face directly. 17 cracks, same as yesterday, same as the day before. Counting kept me sane. Counting gave me something to hold on to when everything else slipped through my fingers like sand. My name was written in, bruises across my skin, a map of survival that nobody bothered to read. I was nobody's daughter, nobody's anything, just a ghost haunting the edges of a life that had forgotten how to be gentle. The apartment smelled like rot and regret, mold creeping up the walls like shame made visible. We lived in the basement of a building that had given up trying to be beautiful decades ago, in a part of the city where sirens sang lullabies and hope went to die. Outside, the city pulsed with a rhythm I could feel through the thin walls. Footsteps, car engines, distant arguments, the soundtrack of survival in a place that chewed people up and spit them out without ceremony. My father kicked an empty bottle across the floor. It rolled until it hit my foot, and I stared at it like it might hold answers. How many bottles had it taken to turn him into this? How many promises had he drowned before he started drowning me? "You hear me?" He grabbed my arm, yanked me to my feet with the kind of careless violence that had become routine. His grip left marks. It always did. "Found someone who wants you. Gonna pay good money. Enough to keep me stocked for months." The words hit slower than his fists, but cut deeper. He was selling me. Actually selling me like I was property. Like I was something that could be traded for his next fix, his next escape. I should have felt shocked, should have screamed or fought or begged. But I felt nothing. Just the hollow ache of someone who'd stopped being surprised by cruelty a long time ago. "Who?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Broken glass trying to sound whole. Don't matter who. Matters that he's got cash, and I got debts. He released my arm, turned away like the conversation was already over, like my life was a transaction he'd already completed in his mind. I stood there, swaying slightly, my body already preparing for whatever came next. Survival had taught me to bend instead of break, to become water when the world demanded I be stone. But something stirred beneath the numbness. Not hope exactly. Something darker. Something that tasted like fury wrapped in resignation. The knock came an hour later. 3 sharp raps that echoed through our pathetic excuse for a home like gunshots. My father straightened, smoothed his stained shirt like appearances mattered, like we weren't exactly what we looked like. Desperate. Disposable. Damned. He opened the door, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The man who entered didn't walk. He moved like shadows given form, like violence wearing an expensive suit. Dark hair, darker eyes, a face carved from marble and cruelty, and something I didn't have a name for. Power, maybe. The kind that didn't need to announce itself. Behind him, 2 others. Silent, watchful, their presence filling the cramped space until I could barely breathe. My father's voice changed instantly, took on that syrupy tone he used when he wanted something. "Sir, thank you for coming. This is her. Not much to look at, but she's young, healthy, does what she's told." I wanted to disappear. Wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. Instead, I stood there, chin down, eyes fixed on those 17 cracks because looking at them was easier than looking at the man who'd come to buy me. The stranger didn't speak immediately. His gaze moved over me, clinical, assessing, and I felt it like touch. Not the violent kind I knew. Something else. Something that made my skin prickle with awareness I didn't understand. "How much do you owe?" His voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command attention. My father stammered out numbers. Lies, probably. Inflated debts to justify what he was doing. The stranger listened without expression, then reached into his jacket. I tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a wallet, thick with bills that represented more money than I'd seen in my entire life. He counted out cash, slow, deliberate, each bill a nail in the coffin of whatever remained of my childhood. My father's eyes went wide, greedy, already calculating how many bottles that stack represented. But the stranger didn't hand it over. Not yet. His gaze shifted to me, pinned me in place. "What's your name?" The question caught me off guard. Nobody had asked my name in so long, I'd almost forgotten I had one. The bruises didn't need names. The girl in the basement didn't matter enough for introductions. I swallowed hard, forced the word past my lips. Bianca. Bianca. He repeated it like he was testing the weight, the shape, the truth of it. Then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Not cruel. Not kind. Something in between. That I couldn't read. "Your debts are paid." He finally handed the money to my father, who snatched it like a starving man grabbing food. But when my father reached for me, the stranger stepped between us. "From now on, she belongs to me." The words should have terrified me. Should have confirmed every nightmare I'd spent the past hour imagining. Instead, they felt like a door opening in a room I'd thought had no exits. My father didn't argue, didn't protest or pretend to care. He just nodded, counted his blood money again, and turned away. Dismissed. Erased. Like I'd never existed at all. The stranger extended his hand toward me. Not grabbing. Not forcing. Offering. I stared at it, at the clean lines of his palm, the calluses that spoke of violence he chose rather than violence that chose him. "What happens now?" I whispered. Now? His dark eyes held mine, and I saw something flicker there. Not pity. Something harder. More honest. "Now you learn what it means to be free." I didn't believe him. Freedom wasn't something people like me got to have. But I took his hand anyway because staying was death, and leaving was at least a chance. His grip was warm, steady. Nothing like my father's. He led me toward the door, and I didn't look back. Not at the apartment that had been my prison. Not at the man who'd been my warden. Behind me, I heard my father crack open a fresh bottle. The sound followed me up the stairs and into the night, the last thing I'd ever hear from him. The city looked different from the backseat of an expensive car. Brighter somehow, like I was seeing it through new eyes. The two silent men sat in front, and the stranger, my stranger now I supposed, sat beside me. He didn't speak, didn't touch. Just existed in the space next to me like a question I wasn't ready to answer. We drove through neighborhoods that got nicer with each mile, buildings that didn't sag under the weight of broken dreams, streets where the lights actually worked. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching my old life blur into memory. "You're safe now." His voice cut through my thoughts, quiet but absolute. I turned to look at him. Really look at him for the first time. He wasn't as old as I'd first thought. Maybe 30, maybe less. Hard to tell when someone wore authority like a second. Skin. Safe from what? I asked, because I'd learned that safety was a relative term. From him. From anyone who thinks they can use you. His jaw tightened. From everything you've known. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly it hurt worse than any bruise. But belief required trust. And trust required evidence I didn't have. The car pulled up to a building that looked like it belonged in a different city entirely. Glass and steel reaching toward the sky. Doormen in uniforms, the kind of place I'd only seen in movies. "This is home?" The word felt foreign in my mouth. "This is where you'll stay." He opened the door, stepped out, waited for me to follow. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors that reflected my dirty sneakers, chandeliers that cost more than my father's yearly drinking budget, air that smelled clean for the first time in my memory. People nodded respectfully as we passed, their eyes sliding over me without judgment, without question. Like I belonged. Here. Like I was someone worth acknowledging. We took an elevator that moved so smoothly I barely felt it, up and up until the doors opened directly into an apartment that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that looked too expensive to sit on, space. So much space I could breathe without feeling walls press in. "This is yours." He gestured around the massive living room. Everything you need is here. Clothes in the bedroom, food in the kitchen. The bathroom has whatever you might want. I stood in the center of all that luxury, feeling smaller than I had in the basement. None of this made sense. People didn't rescue broken girls out of kindness. There was always a price. Always. What do you want from me? The question came out harsh, defensive. I crossed my arms over my chest, suddenly aware of how I must look. Dirty, bruised, wrapped in clothes that had seen better years. His expression didn't change. Tonight? Nothing. Tomorrow? We'll talk about what comes next. But right now, you need rest. You need to remember what it feels like to be safe. He moved toward the door, and panic flared in my chest. Wait. I don't even know your name. He paused, hand on the doorknob, looked back with those dark, unreadable eyes. Call me Rupert. Then he was gone, and I was alone in a palace that felt more surreal than anything I'd ever experienced. I stood there for a long time, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to burst in and tell me this was a mistake, a joke, a trap. But nothing happened. Just silence. The kind of silence that didn't feel threatening. I walked to the window, pressed my palm against the glass, and stared out at a city that suddenly looked full of possibilities instead of just pain. Below, life continued. Cars moving, people walking, the world spinning without stopping to acknowledge that mine had just shifted on its axis. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass. Bruised, wary, but still breathing. Still here. And for the oney, first time in longer than I could remember, I let myself wonder what tomorrow might bring. The shower was the first thing I did. Not because I was dirty, though I was. Because I needed to wash away the feeling of being sold, of having a price tag attached to my existence. The water ran hot, almost too hot, scalding away layers of shame I hadn't known I carried. I stood under the spray until my skin turned red, until the steam filled my lungs and I could pretend I was breathing something clean. The bathroom was bigger than the entire basement apartment. Marble everywhere. Soft towels that smelled like something floral. Products I didn't know the names for lined up like soldiers. I used them all, scrubbing and conditioning and moisturizing until I barely recognized the girl staring back from the mirror. Without the grime, without the defensive hunch to my shoulders, I looked almost normal, almost like someone who deserved nice things. The clothes in the bedroom fit perfectly. That should have been my first clue that this wasn't random kindness. Rupert had planned this, had known my size, had prepared for me. The realization should have scared me. Instead, it made me curious. How long had he known about me? How long had he been watching? I chose jeans that didn't have holes, a soft sweater that felt like a hug, and stood in front of the mirror trying to reconcile this version of myself with the one who'd cowered on a concrete floor hours ago. They were the same person, but also not. Sleep should have been easy. The bed was massive, covered in blankets that felt like clouds, pillows that cradled my head like they'd been designed specifically for me. But I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of safety. No shouting, no breaking glass, no footsteps that meant danger, just the quiet hum of expensive heating and the distant murmur of the city below. I must have dozed eventually because I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to cover. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The sale. The rescue. Rupert. I sat up slowly, half expecting to find myself back in the basement, this entire experience just a dream my brain had conjured to escape reality. But no. The luxury remained. Real. Solid. Terrifying in its implications. There was a knock at the door. Soft, polite. Nothing like the pounding that usually preceded bad news. I padded across the floor barefoot, opened it to find a woman holding a tray. Breakfast. She smiled, warm and genuine. Rupert thought you might be hungry. She set the tray on the kitchen counter and left before I could respond. Like feeding strange girls in expensive apartments was completely normal. The food was more than I usually ate in a week. Fresh fruit, pastries, eggs cooked perfectly, coffee that smelled like heaven. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, waiting for someone to tell me I didn't deserve this. Nobody came. I was washing my plate when Rupert appeared. No knock, no warning. He just materialized in the doorway like he'd been there all along, watching. I jumped, nearly dropped the dish. You need to make noise when you move. He almost smiled. Noted. We need to talk. The words I'd been dreading. Here it was. The explanation, the price, the truth of what belonging to him actually meant. I dried my hands, forced myself to meet his gaze. Okay. Sit. He gestured to the couch, and I obeyed, perching on the edge like I might need to run. He took the chair across from me, leaned back with the casual confidence of someone who'd never had to fight for space. Do you know who I am? I shook my head. Should I? Most people in this city do. He studied me, assessing. I run things. Businesses, mostly. Some legal, some less so. People respect me because they fear me. And they fear me because I don't make empty threats. The words should have terrified me. Should have sent me running back to whatever safety I'd known before. But I'd learned that fear came in many flavors, and this wasn't the kind that made my skin crawl. Why did you buy me? The question I'd been holding since yesterday. Because your father was going to sell you to someone far worse. His voice went cold. Someone who would have broken you in ways you couldn't imagine. Someone who collects broken things and never lets them heal. So this is charity? The word came out bitter. He laughed, short and harsh. No. This is investment. I wanted to hit him. This beautiful, dangerous man who spoke about me like I was a commodity. But I kept my hands still, my voice level. In what? In you. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes intense. You survived 16 years with a monster. That takes strength most people never develop. I can use that strength. For what? Whatever you choose. He sat back again. You're not a prisoner here. You can leave any time. But if you stay, I'll teach you everything I know. How to fight, how to think, how to survive in a world that's designed to crush people like us. And in return, you belong to me. The possessive phrase again, loaded with implications I couldn't decode. Not in the way your father thought. Not as property, but as family, as protection, as mine to defend against anyone who tries to hurt you. I stared at him, trying to find the lie, the manipulation, the hidden agenda, but his expression remained open, honest in a way that felt more dangerous than deception. What if I say no? Then I'll set you up somewhere safe, give you enough money to start over, and you'll never see me again. His gaze never wavered. The choice is yours. The choice is yours. Words I'd never heard before. Words that felt like power and terror mixed together. I thought about the basement, about my father counting his blood money, about the life I'd escaped. And I thought about this man who'd paid a fortune for my freedom and was now offering to let me walk away. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. But I'd learned that sense was overrated. Survival mattered more. I'll stay. The words came out stronger than I felt. But I want to know why. Why me specifically? Why not just pay off the debt and leave me there? Because I saw myself in you. His admission was quiet. Vulnerable. In a way that transformed his face. I know what it's like to be sold by the people who should protect you. I know what it's like to claw your way out of hell and still feel the flames. The honesty in his voice broke something in my chest. This wasn't charity. This wasn't investment. This was recognition. One survivor seeing another. Okay. I nodded slowly. Teach me. He smiled then. Really smiled. And it changed everything. Good. We start tomorrow. Tonight, you rest. You have years of exhaustion to sleep off. He stood to leave, and I found myself not wanting him to go. The silence felt too big without him in it. Rupert? He turned back. Thank you. For buying me instead of letting someone else. The days that followed, blurred together in a strange rhythm of healing and learning. Rupert kept his promise. Every morning, he arrived before dawn, waking me with coffee and expectations. We'd go to a private gym in the building's basement, and he'd teach me how to defend myself. Not the desperate flailing I'd used against my father, but real technique. How to block, how to strike, how to use someone's size against them. You're smaller than most threats you'll face. His voice was clinical, professional, as his hands positioned my arms correctly. That means you need to be smarter, faster. Use their momentum. Let them destroy themselves. I learned quickly, driven by years of pent-up rage that finally had a productive outlet. Each punch I threw carried the weight of every time I'd been too weak to fight back. Each block represented a future where I'd never be helpless again. Rupert was a patient teacher but demanding. When I got lazy, he pushed harder. When I wanted to quit, he reminded me why I'd stayed. You're not doing this for me. His eyes would burn into mine during those moments. You're doing this for the girl who thought she had no value. Prove to her she was wrong. After training came breakfast, usually in his penthouse, a floor above mine. I learned he lived alone, surrounded by luxury that felt cold compared to the warmth he'd given my space. We'd eat in comfortable silence, or he'd tell me stories about the city, about the people who ran it, about the delicate balance of power that kept everything from falling into chaos. You talk about it like it's beautiful. I'd said one morning, watching him describe a territorial dispute with the kind of passion most people reserved for art. It is beautiful, he'd replied. It's brutal and honest. No pretense. No lies about what people really are. Just survival dressed up in expensive suits. In the afternoons, he'd disappear to handle business I didn't ask about. I'd spend those hours exploring my new reality, reading books from his extensive library, staring out at the city and trying to understand who I was becoming. Sometimes his associates would visit. Hard men with careful eyes who treated me with respect that felt earned rather than given. They never asked questions, never made me feel like an outsider. Like my presence in Rupert's life was simply accepted fact. One of them, a man with gray at his temples and scars that told stories, pulled me aside one afternoon. You're good for him, he'd said, voice gruff. Haven't seen him smile in years. Not real smiles. Not until you. The comment stayed with me, burrowing under my skin. I'd noticed it too. The way Rupert's carefully controlled exterior would crack around me, revealing something softer underneath. The way he'd watch me when he thought I wasn't looking, expression unguarded. We were dancing around something neither of us knew how to name. By the third week, I could take down men twice my size. By the fourth, I'd stopped flinching at sudden movements. By the fifth, I realized I'd stopped thinking about the basement entirely. It existed in my past like a bad dream, fading with each day I spent in the light. But healing isn't linear. One night, I woke gasping, trapped in a nightmare where my father had found me, where Rupert hadn't been real, where everything had been a cruel trick. I stumbled out of bed, needing air, needing proof that this life was solid. Rupert found me on the balcony, shaking despite the warm night. He didn't ask questions, just wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and stood beside me, solid and real. They don't stop, I whispered. The nightmares. They will. His voice carried certainty. Eventually. Your brain is just processing trauma. It needs time. How long did yours take? The question slipped out before I could stop it. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I'll let you know when they stop. The admission cracked something open between us. We stood there in the darkness, two people, carrying similar scars, and the space between us felt charged with understanding. I started noticing things I'd missed before. The way he'd tense when someone raised their voice. The careful control he maintained over every movement, like he was always ready to fight. The scars on his knuckles that spoke of violence survived. We were mirror images, just at different stages of healing. Tell me your story, I said one night over dinner. He'd been teaching me about wine, about how to navigate the world he lived in. His hands stilled on his glass. You don't want to know that story. Yes, I do. I met his eyes. You know everything about me. The selling, the abuse, all of it. But I don't know you. Fair enough. He set down his glass, leaned back. My father was like yours. Different poison, same result. He sold me to a crew when I was 12. Paid off his debts with his son. I worked for them for years, doing things I'll never tell you about. But I learned. I watched. I waited. And when the time was right, I took everything from everyone who'd ever hurt me. The story should have scared me. Instead, it made him more human. Less the untouchable figure who'd rescued me, and more a person who understood exactly what I carried. Did it help? I asked quietly. The revenge? No. His smile was bitter. But it gave me power. And power meant no one could ever sell me again. I understood that. The need to be strong enough that the past couldn't reach you. We'd both built fortresses around ourselves, brick by brick, scar by scar. Except now the walls didn't feel quite as necessary. Not around each other. Something shifted that night. The space between us grew smaller, charged with possibility. I'd catch him watching me with an expression I couldn't name, something hungry and careful all at once. And I'd find myself gravitating toward him, seeking his presence like warmth. It terrified me. Not because I didn't want it, because I did. Because wanting felt dangerous after a lifetime of having, want used against me. Rupert seemed to sense my hesitation. He never pushed, never demanded, just existed in my orbit, patient and steady, waiting for me to be ready. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready, but I was learning that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. We were sitting in his study one evening, rain hammering against the windows, when he finally asked the question I'd been dreading. What do you want from life now? I looked up from the book I'd been pretending to read. What do you mean? You're healing. You're strong. You could do anything. His dark eyes studied me. So what do you want? No one had ever asked me that before. What I wanted had never mattered. I'd spent my entire life in survival mode, worried about making it through each day. Wanting felt like a luxury I hadn't earned. I don't know. The admission felt shameful. That's okay. Rupert's voice was gentle. You have time to figure it out. But I'd like to make you an offer. I set down the book, giving him my full attention. What kind of offer? Work with me. Really work with me. Not as someone I'm protecting, but as a partner. His intensity made the air feel thinner. You're smart, adaptable. People underestimate you. Those are valuable assets. Doing what? Whatever needs doing. Meeting with people, gathering information, making deals. His lips curved. Being the face people trust while I'm the force they fear. You want me to be bait? No. He leaned forward. I want you to be powerful. There's a difference. The idea should have repulsed me. I'd been used my entire life. But this felt different. This was choice. This was agency. This was taking all the pain I'd survived and turning it into something useful. What if I'm not good at it? Then you'll learn. Same as everything else. Rupert's confidence in me never wavered. I wouldn't offer if I didn't believe you could excel. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not just what he was offering, but what I wanted. And I realized that I wanted to matter. Wanted to be more than a victim who'd gotten lucky. Wanted to prove that surviving had a purpose. Okay. The word felt like a door opening. I'll do it. His smile transformed his face, made him look younger, almost boyish. Good. We start training tomorrow. Different kind this time. I spent that night unable to sleep, mind racing with possibilities. This was the beginning of something new. Not just healing, but becoming. The girl who'd cowered in a basement was gone, and in her place, someone stronger was emerging. The rain continued into the next day, matching the intensity of what Rupert had planned. We sat in his study, papers spread across his massive desk, as he explained the intricacies of his world. This is the structure. He pointed to a diagram that looked like a corporate flowchart. Each person has a role. Each role has rules. Break the rules. Face consequences. Simple. But you said some of it's legal. Some is. Construction, real estate, legitimate businesses that fund everything else. His finger traced lines connecting different operations. The illegal parts exist in the spaces between. Protection, information, services the city needs but won't acknowledge. It sounded cleaner than I'd expected. More organized, less like the chaos I'd imagined. Your role will be relationship management. He pulled out another document. You'll meet with business owners, community leaders, people who need our services but can't be seen associating with me directly. You'll be the bridge. Why would they trust me? Because you don't look like you belong in this world. He met my eyes. You look innocent, approachable. That's your greatest weapon. The idea of using my appearance, the same vulnerability that had made me a target, as a strength felt revolutionary. But can I actually do it? Talk to these people? Convince them? You've spent your life reading people to survive. That makes you better at this than most. His certainty was absolute. You know when someone's lying, when they're dangerous, when they're weak. Those instincts are invaluable. We spent hours going over scenarios, practicing conversations, learning the subtle art of negotiation. Rupert was a patient teacher, correcting my mistakes without judgment, praising my successes without patronizing. By evening, my head throbbed with new information, but I felt energized rather than exhausted. This was purpose. This was becoming someone who mattered. You did well today. Rupert poured 2 glasses of wine, handed me one. Most people take weeks to grasp what you learned in hours. I accepted the glass. Let the wine warm my throat. I'm motivated. I can tell. He studied me over the rim of his glass. Question is, what's motivating you? Revenge? Power? Proving something? All of it. I admitted. I want to prove I'm more than what happened to me. Want to have power so no one can hurt me again. Want revenge against every person who ever looked at me like I was disposable. Honest. He approved. Those are good reasons. Just remember that revenge is a tool, not a purpose. Use it, but don't let it use you. Wise words from someone who admitted revenge didn't help. He laughed, genuine and warm. Do as I say, not as I did. The moment stretched between us, comfortable and charged. I'd grown used to his presence, craved it even. He'd become the foundation I built myself on, steady when everything else shifted. The realization that I was falling for him hit like cold water, sudden, undeniable, terrifying. I'd never had healthy love modeled for me. Didn't know what it looked like when it wasn't wrapped in manipulation and pain. But this feeling, this warmth that spread through my chest when Rupert smiled, this security I felt in his presence, it had to be something close. I should go. I stood abruptly, needing space to process. My apartment suddenly felt too far away, and not far enough simultaneously. Rupert caught my wrist, gentle but firm. Stay. Just the one word, loaded with meaning I wasn't ready to unpack. I can't. The words came out broken. Why not? Because I'm scared. The admission escaped before I could stop it. Of what? Of this. I gestured between us. Of wanting something I might lose. Of trusting someone who could destroy me. He stood slowly, still holding my wrist, his thumb tracing circles that made my breath catch. I would never hurt you. You don't know that. My voice cracked. People change. Situations change. What if saving me was just interesting at first, but becomes a burden? Then I'd tell you. His other hand came up, cupped my face with devastating gentleness. I don't do anything I don't want to, and I don't keep people around out of obligation. You're here because I want you here. The intensity in his eyes made my knees weak. But I'm broken. You're healing. There's a difference. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. And even broken things have value. Ask me how I know. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the feeling of his hands on my skin, past the way he looked at me like I mattered. Like I was something precious instead of disposable. What do you want from me? I whispered, echoing the question I'd asked that first night. Everything. The word was a promise and a threat. But only what you're willing to give. Only what you choose. Choice. Always choice with him. The freedom to decide, to walk away, to stay. It was the most terrifying gift anyone had ever given me. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Care about someone without being afraid they'll use it against me. Then we'll learn together. His forehead rested against mine. Because I'm terrified too. Of what? Rupert pulled back enough to meet my eyes. Of how much I need you. The confession shattered something in my chest, broke open all the walls I'd built. This powerful man who feared nothing, admitted to being afraid of losing me. It felt impossible and perfect simultaneously. I kissed him. Not because I knew it was right, but because I couldn't not kiss him. Because the distance between us had become unbearable. Because I was tired of being afraid of wanting. He responded immediately, arms wrapping around me like I might disappear, mouth moving against mine with careful intensity. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, hungry, two people who'd survived hell finding something worth living for. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine again. We should talk about this. I know. I didn't move. But I don't want to. Not yet. Can we just exist in it for a moment? He laughed softly. Yeah, we can do that. So we stood there in his study, rain still falling outside, holding each other like we were the only solid things in a shifting world. And for that moment, everything felt possible. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Rupert introduced me to his world properly, no longer as someone he protected, but as someone who belonged. We attended meetings together, handled delicate negotiations, built relationships with people who controlled the city's underbelly. I discovered I was good at it. Better than good. People trusted me, opened up to me, shared information they'd never give Rupert directly. My apparent innocence was a mask I learned to wear and remove at will, but it was the quiet moments I treasured most. Late nights in his study, learning the business over wine and conversation. Early mornings training together, our bodies moving in synchronized violence. Stolen kisses in between meetings. Passion we kept carefully controlled in public. We were building something together. Not just a partnership, but a life. And it terrified me how much I wanted it to last. Because I'd learned that good things were temporary, that happiness was just a setup for heartbreak. My father taught me that everything beautiful eventually gets destroyed. But Rupert was teaching me something different. That beauty could be strong. That happiness was worth fighting for. That I deserved good. Things not despite my past, but because of how I'd survived it. I was learning to believe him. 6 months after he'd bought my freedom, we stood on his balcony watching the sun set over the city we'd claimed together. This view never gets old. I leaned against the railing, feeling the wind pull at my hair. It's ours now. His arm wrapped around my waist. Everything you see. We built this. I built it. You made it mean something. The distinction mattered to him. Success without purpose is just accumulation. But this, what we're doing, it matters. I turned to face him, studying the man who'd become my entire world. Do you ever regret it? Buying me? Never. The answer was immediate. Absolute. Best investment I ever made. I hit his chest lightly. I'm not an investment. No. He caught my hand, brought it to his lips. You're everything I didn't know I needed. You're so dramatic. It's one of my charms. His smile was teasing. Admit it. You love my dramatic declarations. I might. I stepped closer, eliminating the space between us. But I love the quiet moments more. When you're just you, not the person everyone fears. Those moments are only for you. His voice dropped. Everything real, everything honest, that's yours alone. The words settled into my chest, warm and permanent. I'd spent my life being nothing to everyone. Now I was everything to someone who mattered. I love you. The words escaped before I could stop them. Terrifying in their honesty. I'd never said them before. Never to anyone. Rupert's expression transformed, something fierce and tender breaking through his careful control. Say it again. I love you. Stronger this time, certain. You saved me. But more than that, you saw me. Actually saw me when I was invisible. His hands framed my face, thumbs brushing my cheekbones. I love you too. Have since that first night when you chose to stay instead of running. The kiss was different this time. Not desperate, but deep. A promise sealed in touch, in breath, in the space between heartbeats. We stayed there until the stars emerged, two people who'd survived darkness finding light in each other. The city spread below us, pulsing with life we'd shaped, with power we'd claimed, with a future we were building brick by careful brick. This was freedom. Not the absence of constraints, but the choice to stay, to build, to love, despite every reason not to. And as Rupert held me against him, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear, I realized that the girl who'd been sold for bottle money was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone dangerous, Someone who'd learned that belonging didn't mean being owned. It meant being chosen. And choosing back. The city lights glittered like promises, and for the first time in my life, I believed in tomorrow. Not because it would be easy, but because I'd be facing it with someone who understood that survival was just the beginning, that real life, the kind worth living, started when you stopped just existing and began actually building something beautiful from the ruins. We stood there until the night grew cold, then moved inside to warmth and wine and conversations that stretched into dawn. Building our empire, yes, but more importantly, building us. And that was worth everything.